We always picture Ice Age cave women sitting safely by a warm fire inside a dry cave, while the men went out into the frozen wilderness to hunt. But forensic analysis of prehistoric human skeletons shows that Ice Age women spent more hours out in sub-zero blizzards doing extreme physical labor than the men ever did.
How did human females manage to survive freezing temperatures and brutal physical strain while carrying the entire burden of reproducing the species? The answer lies in a hidden world of extreme survival that modern history completely got wrong. To understand what life was like for an Ice Age woman, you first have to throw out the idea of cozy cave living.
Most caves were cold, damp, moldy stone vaults filled with dripping water and dangerous predators like cave hyenas. Picture sleeping on freezing stone, wrapped in stiff, damp animal skins, while an Arctic blizzard howls through the cave mouth. If you stayed inside too long, the dampness chilled your body and caused painful joint inflammation.
So why did women spend so much of their time outdoors in the freezing wind instead? The reality was that staying alive required endless outdoor labor that could never stop for a single day. Women were responsible for collecting every scrap of fuel needed to keep the band from freezing to death.
Picture walking miles across frozen tundra to drag hundreds of pounds of damp scrub brush and heavy wood back to camp. If the fire went out for even a couple hours during an Arctic cold snap, the whole group could die. But gathering fuel was actually the easiest task on their daily list. Handling monthly hygiene during an ice age was a nightmare that modern people can barely comprehend.
There were no cotton pads, warm running water, or privacy in a small band struggling to survive in sub-zero weather. Imagine trying to clean yourself using frozen moss, dried lichen, or scrapings of animal fur while sitting in a drafty hide shelter at -20 degrees. A single infection could turn deadly in days without any form of antibiotics.
How did women deal with this physical ordeal month after month while constantly on the move? The physical strain on a woman's body left permanent marks on her bones that scientists can still read today. Scanning the arm bones of prehistoric females reveals massive muscle attachment points that rival those of modern professional athletes.
Picture a woman using her bare hands and stone blades to skin and butcher a 2,000-pound woolly mammoth before the meat froze solid. This back-breaking labor was part of their daily routine. Was this intense labor really just background work, or were women doing far more than we thought?
For over a century, popular history taught us that women were passive gatherers who stayed close to camp while men did all the heavy lifting. But recent biomechanical studies of Ice Age female skeletons proved that these women had upper body strength that matched elite modern rowers.
They were not sitting around waiting for meat to be brought home. They were actively dragging heavy animal carcasses, lifting massive stones, and building winter shelters. What else were these prehistoric women doing that traditional history books managed to miss? One of the most grueling jobs for an Ice Age woman was processing animal hides to make clothing.
Animal skins start out stiff, greasy, and covered in bacteria that cause quick rot. Imagine spending 10 hours a day scraping fat off a frozen hide with a sharp piece of chipped flint until your fingers lose all feeling. If you did not process the leather correctly, the clothing would rot or freeze stiff as iron in the cold.
How did they manage to turn rough animal skins into soft, waterproof clothing without modern chemicals? The secret tool for softening leather was something every woman carried with her everywhere: her own teeth. Ice Age women used their jaws as a third hand, holding tough animal hides between their teeth while pulling and scraping with stone tools.
Picture chewing on stiff, salty, greasy reindeer hide for hours every single day just to make it pliable enough to stitch into boots. By the time a woman reached her mid-20s, her teeth were often worn down to the gums. What happened when their teeth wore down so far that eating became painful? When a woman lost her teeth, her ability to process clothing and chew tough dried meat collapsed.
Exposed tooth nerves meant constant, agonizing toothaches with zero pain relief available. Imagine living with an exposed nerve in your jaw while trying to sleep on frozen ground during a dark Arctic winter.
Infection from decayed teeth could easily spread to the bloodstream and become fatal within weeks.
How did women manage to survive pregnancy and nursing while dealing with chronic infections and physical pain? Pregnancy during the Ice Age was an extraordinary gamble with death. A pregnant woman needed an extra 300 to 500 calories every single day just to keep her baby growing normally.
Picture searching for edible roots under 3 feet of hard snow when food was so scarce that the group was eating boiled leather scraps. If a mother did not get enough fat and protein, her body would consume its own muscle tissue to keep the fetus alive. How did their bodies cope with giving birth in such extreme conditions?
Giving birth during a freezing winter was one of the most dangerous moments in a cave woman's life. Human infants have exceptionally large heads compared to the female pelvis, making childbirth painful and physically risky even today. Picture laying on a bed of dry grass inside a hide tent, giving birth in near total darkness while freezing wind blows through the seams.
There were no sterile bandages, warm water, or medical help if complications arose. What percentage of mothers actually survived the process of bringing new life into the world? Historical estimates suggest that up to 1 in 3 women died during their childbearing years, largely due to complications during labor or postpartum infections.
A simple tear or excessive bleeding on the cold dirt floor meant certain death within hours. Imagine watching your mother, sister, or daughter die during childbirth and having to immediately pack up camp and move before predators smelled the blood. How did the remaining group members keep the newborn baby alive without milk from its mother?
If a mother died, another nursing woman in the band had to take over feeding the infant immediately. But producing enough breast milk for 2 infants required an immense amount of extra calories that the band rarely had. Picture a woman nursing 2 babies at once while her own body weight plummeted during a spring famine. If no nursing surrogate was available, the baby was fed pulverized animal fat and broth, which rarely kept an infant alive for long. How did mothers protect their babies from the lethal cold once they survived birth? We have always been told that hunting big game was exclusively a man's job, while women stayed behind with the children. But recent archaeological excavations of Ice Age graves across North and South America have shattered that myth completely. Scientists found that nearly half of all burials containing big game hunting tools, like stone spear points and butchering knives, actually belong to biological females. Ice Age women were not sitting on the sidelines. They were actively hunting horses, bison, and mammoths alongside the men. How did they hunt dangerous megafauna while caring for young children? Female hunters had to balance the extreme danger of tracking wild animals with the constant demand of caring for infants.
Imagine stalking a herd of wild horses across open ice while carrying a newborn strapped to your chest in a leather sling. A single cry from the baby could alert the herd and ruin a hunt that took days to set up. Yet women adjusted, using natural plant sedatives or rhythmic rocking to keep babies quiet during long stalks. What kind of weapons were these female hunters using to take down animals 10 times their size? Women excelled at using spear throwers, ancient wooden tools that acted as a leverage amplifier to hurl spears at massive speeds. Picture standing 50 yards away from a panicked woolly rhinoceros, launching a stone-tipped spear with enough force to pierce thick hide and bone. Using a spear thrower required skill, timing, and upper body flexibility rather than pure brute strength. This made women equally lethal hunting partners on the open plains. But what happened when a hunt went wrong and an animal turned to attack? Getting trampled or gored by large game was a constant hazard for every hunter in the band.
Bone fractures found in Ice Age skeletons show injury patterns remarkably similar to modern rodeo riders. Imagine suffering a broken leg or crushed shoulder out on the open tundra, miles away from shelter. Without modern splints or cast materials, a broken bone often meant permanent disability or fatal gangrene. How did women care for injured band members while keeping up with seasonal migrations?
Caring for the sick and injured fell almost entirely on the women of the tribe. They had to act as surgeons, physical therapists, and pharmacists, using only what nature provided. Picture gathering willow bark to brew a crude pain-killing tea, or applying moldy plant poultices to open wounds to stop bacteria from spreading.
Women memorized hundreds of different plant species, knowing exactly which root could reduce a fever and which berry was deadly poison. How did they hold all this crucial medical knowledge in their heads without any written language? Knowledge was passed down through spoken stories, songs, and visual art created on hide maps and cave walls.
Women held the tribe's collective memory, tracking weather cycles, animal migration routes, and seasonal plant harvests. Imagine memorizing the exact layout of a mountain range you only visited once every 5 years as a child. A single mistake in remembering where freshwater springs were located during a drought could wipe out the entire family group.
Was this deep knowledge recognized by the rest of the tribe? Women were deeply respected for their survival knowledge, but respect did not protect them from the relentless physical toll of daily life. Even basic tasks like gathering fresh water became dangerous engineering problems during peak winter. Imagine chopping through 3 feet of solid river ice with a blunt stone axe just to fill a skin bag with freezing water. Carrying 50 pounds of water back to camp across slippery ice resulted in frequent falls and severe sprains. How did they construct containers that could hold liquid without leaking or freezing?
For decades, art historians believe that the famous prehistoric Venus figurines, small statues of voluptuous women found across Europe, were created by men as erotic symbols or fertility idols. But a groundbreaking study by modern archaeologists revealed a completely different story.
When you analyze the proportions of these figurines, they match the exact perspective of a pregnant woman looking down at her own body. These statues were self-portraits made by women monitoring their own nutritional health during pregnancy.
They were tracking body fat levels because having enough fat reserves was the single most critical factor in surviving an Ice Age winter. Picture carving a tiny limestone statue by flickering firelight, carefully documenting the changes in your body to predict whether you would survive the coming famine. What happened when the winter proved colder and longer than expected? During extreme winter cold snaps, starvation was a constant visitor to every hide tent and cave dwelling. When animal herds migrated away, women had to invent clever ways to extract every single calorie from scraps. Imagine gathering animal bones that had been picked clean days ago, smashing them open with heavy rocks, and boiling them to extract bone marrow and grease. Imagine using a thin needle carved from bird bone to stitch waterproof reindeer hide clothes with thread made from dried animal sinew. A stitched suit of tailored fur created a pocket of warm air around the body, allowing humans to live in regions that would otherwise kill them in minutes. How delicate was the process of making these bone needles?
Making a single bone needle required hours of meticulous grinding against rough sandstone. If a needle snapped during a blizzard, you could not repair damaged clothing, putting the whole family at risk of hypothermia. Picture sitting inside a smoky shelter, carefully guiding a microscopic bone point through tough leather while your fingers were numb from cold. The seams had to be completely airtight and waterproof to block piercing Arctic winds. What other technological innovations were prehistoric women quiet pioneers of? Women were also the master chemists of the Paleolithic world, developing complex glues and binders to craft tools. They mixed birch bark tar, animal fat, and plant charcoal over controlled fires to create waterproof adhesives. Imagine heating birch tree bark in an oxygen-deprived pit to extract thick black pitch, then using it to glue stone blades into wooden handles. If the temperature of the fire was off by just a few degrees, the pitch would burn and become useless. How did they manage fire control without any thermometers? Fire control required precise observation of wood types, flame color, and smoke density, learned over years of practice. Women maintained the tribe's hearth fire 24 hours a day, never letting the embers die out completely. Picture sleeping in shifts during a howling snowstorm, waking up every hour to feed dry grass and fat scraps to a dying flame. Carrying live coals from camp to camp in leather pouches lined with damp moss was an art form in itself. What happened if a sudden downpour extinguished the fire while traveling? Losing fire on the open tundra was an emergency that required immediate action, using hand drills or flint sparkers. Imagine rubbing 2 dry sticks together with all your strength while freezing rain drenches your hair and clothes.
It could take an hour of agonizing friction labor to produce a single glowing ember on a tiny bed of dry tinder. If you failed, the band faced a night of sub-zero temperatures without heat or protection from night predators.
How did women deal with the terrifying threat of Ice Age carnivores? We often think that human evolution was driven entirely by young hunters, but evolutionary biologists have discovered that postmenopausal women were actually our secret survival weapon.
Known as the grandmother hypothesis, the presence of older women who could no longer have children of their own gave Homo sapiens a massive advantage over Neanderthals. Grandmothers gathered food for young children and passed down decades of survival memory, allowing human populations to boom. How did these older women manage to survive to an advanced age in such a harsh world?
Surviving past age 35 made a woman a rare and valuable living library for the entire tribe. Older women knew how to find hidden underground water tubers during severe droughts and how to treat rare diseases. Imagine an elder guiding the tribe through a catastrophic famine because she remembered a similar event from 40 years ago when she was a small child. Her memory was the difference between life and death for dozens of people. But what kind of artistic mark did these women leave behind for us to discover thousands of years later? When archaeologists analyzed the hand stencils left on the walls of famous prehistoric caves in France and Spain, they made a shocking discovery. By measuring the length of the fingers and the pigment prints, scientists determined that nearly 3/4 of all ancient cave art was created by women. Picture blowing red ochre powder through a hollow bone over your outstretched hand, permanently marking your presence on a dark limestone wall deep underground. Why were women going deep into pitch-black cave systems to create this art? Navigating pitch-black cave tunnels required carrying flickering animal fat lamps into narrow stone passages hundreds of feet underground. Imagine crawling on your stomach through damp, tight stone shafts while holding a burning shell filled with liquefied marrow. A single slip could extinguish your light, leaving you trapped in absolute darkness with no way out. Yet women braved these terrifying depths to create sacred symbols, paint animals, and perform spiritual rituals. What were they trying to communicate to future generations? These cave rituals were likely tied to seasonal cycles, spiritual protection, and honoring the animals that gave their lives for human survival. Women acted as spiritual leaders and shamans, using ritual chants, music, and herbal brews to connect with the spirit world. Picture playing a delicate flute carved from a swan bone inside a cavern that echoes like a cathedral. The acoustic resonance of these caves was carefully chosen to enhance the sensory impact of their spiritual ceremonies. How did their daily lives change when winter finally gave way to spring? Spring brought relief from freezing cold, but it introduced a whole new set of deadly challenges for Ice Age women. Rising temperatures melted glaciers, causing massive flash floods that could sweep away entire riverbank camps overnight. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to the roar of icy floodwaters tearing through your shelter, forcing you to grab your children and flee into the dark. Melting snow also woke up starved predators like cave bears emerging from hibernation, looking for easy prey. How did women protect their camps from hungry bears? Women used thorn barriers, smoking fire pits, and loud noisemakers carved from bone to deter dangerous scavengers. They had to stay constantly alert while gathering fresh spring vegetation, roots, and bird eggs to replenish their starved bodies. Picture wading through muddy swamps infested with swarms of biting insects while carrying heavy baskets of gathered greens.
Spring was a race against time to rebuild body fat reserves before the cold returned. What impact did this endless cycle of stress have on their overall life expectancy? The average life expectancy for an Ice Age woman was under 30 years old, with very few surviving past 40. Their bodies bore the cumulative damage of extreme cold, physical trauma, smoke inhalation, and nutritional stress.
Yet despite these unbelievable hardships, women successfully raised enough children to allow the human species to expand across the globe. Their physical resilience and technological creativity laid the foundations for human civilization. What was the absolute worst hidden danger they faced every day that modern people completely overlook?
We usually assume that the biggest threat to a cave woman's health was freezing to death or getting attacked by wild animals. But recent chemical analysis of prehistoric skeletal remains revealed that the silent killer of Ice Age women was actually domestic indoor air pollution.
Spending months inside tiny, unvented winter shelters, breathing dense soot from hearth fires, caused severe chronic lung disease, identical to heavy chain smoking. Their daily effort to stay warm inside was slowly poisoning their lungs from the inside out. Imagine spending every long winter night in a dark shelter filled with stinging smoke that burns your eyes and lungs with every breath you take.
Women suffered from chronic coughing, lung infections, and reduced cardiovascular capacity throughout their adult lives. They endured this constant respiratory torment because the alternative was freezing to death in minutes outside. It was a brutal compromise that every Ice Age woman had to make just to keep her family alive through the night.
When you look back at the reality of life for an Ice Age woman, it was a world of non-stop physical endurance, incredible innovation, and extraordinary bravery. They were not helpless figures waiting in the shadows of history. They were big game hunters, master textile engineers, artists, and medical experts who held human survival in their hands.
Without their mental strength and physical toughness, none of us would be standing here today. Looking at how intensely brutal their everyday existence was, it makes you realize how comfortable our modern lives really are. If you were suddenly transported back to the Ice Age for just 24 hours, which part of a cave woman's daily survival routine do you think would break your spirit first?